Good morning, everybody. My name is Bruce Jones. I'm the Vice President and the Director of the Foreign Policy Program here at Brookings. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today for the launch of Cheng Li's book, Chinese Politics in the Xi Jinping Era, Reassessing Collective Leadership. Of course, we're at a moment when lots of people are reassessing leadership in lots of different countries. And as the Trump administration begins its tenure in Washington, the eyes of the world are on us. Across the globe, questions abound about America's role and how it will proceed. And front and center in that discussion is the U.S. China relationship, which is clearly in play. And today and going forward, Brookings scholars will continue to catalyze a discussion around the important geopolitical and geoeconomic issues in that relationship and its implications for the world in which we live. And to help us with that discussion today, we're delighted to have the former Secretary of Commerce, the Honorable Barbara Franklin, join us for this morning's keynote address. She'll share insights from her extensive experience working directly with Chinese leadership and the U.S. leadership. Her trailblazing career, I think that's the only way you could describe it, touched almost every sector: corporate, governmental, academic, entrepreneurial. She's an expert on corporate governance, on auditing, financial reporting practices, and on trade. She currently serves as president and CEO of Barbara Franklin Enterprises, an international consulting firm. Her extensive experience and expertise first drew the attention of President Nixon, and she served also for President George W. Bush as the 29th Secretary of Commerce. And in that role, I think many of you will recall her historic trade mission to China, which was instrumental in reopening commercial relationships between the two nations. I'm trying hard to avoid already asking her a question about our current trade policy, but we'll no doubt come to that. Needless to say, we're looking forward to her thoughts on the U.S. China relationship. And following her remarks, Cheng Li will present his book, Chinese Politics in the Xi Jinping Era, Reassessing Collective Leadership. As you know, he's a senior fellow here at Brookings and the director of our Thornton China Center. His work highlights trends in Chinese elite politics and also shares his forecasts about leadership change, potential leadership change at the upcoming 19th Party Congress. He's a China scholar who needs no introduction. His book, which I have to say I think is a masterwork, and I don't use that term lightly or commonly, has solidified his status as what Andrew Nathan recently called our leading expert in the Chinese political elite and a leading Chinese scholar in general in the United States. We're very proud of Cheng Li and of his book. I frequently travel to China with Cheng Li, and everywhere we go, we meet very senior Chinese leadership. And what happens is we have a discussion, and then they kind of push me aside and they pull Cheng Li over and say, "Can you tell me what's really going on?" It's quite impressive to watch. So we're very honored to have him here, to have him as the director of our China Center, and I'm very proud to be a small part of helping launch his book. But for now, following his talk, we'll have a broader panel discussion on Sino-American relations with David Lampton, Richard McGregor, and Dennis Wilder, and I'm very pleased that our own non-resident fellow and a staff writer at The New Yorker, Evan Osnos, will moderate the panel today. So with that, thank you all for being here, and please join me in welcoming the Honorable Barbara Franklin.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Bruce, for that generous introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and I have to tell you, speaking of momentous change, I just wonder what has happened between the time I left home and arrived here. So this promises to be a year of momentous challenge and change, possibly change, in the relationship between the United States and China. And today I'm particularly talking about the economic side of that relationship, and a relationship that I believe is the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world. Now, it's obvious, to state the obvious, on the U.S. side, the change is the election of President Trump. And on the Chinese side, Cheng Li will tell you what changes are going to emanate from the 19th Communist Party Congress in the fall. But first, to think back for a minute about the Sino-U.S. economic relationship. It has grown exponentially since 1979. through both Democratic and Republican administrations. From a modest beginning, two-way trade is well over $500 billion. And I'm proud to have played a role in restarting that economic relationship when President Bush sent me, after he lost the election in 1992, to both remove a ban on government-to-government contact, but also to restart the U.S. China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, JCCT, getting the economic relationship started again after a rather moribund few years. And now, of course, I think we all know that China is the third largest market for U.S. products and services, a $400 billion market that many think should be even larger. And according to a new study prepared for the U.S. China Business Council by Oxford Economics, the trade relationship, two-way trade relationship, supports roughly 2.6 million American jobs. Now, turning to President Trump, who as a candidate said a lot of things about China. He pointed to the trade deficit, more than $300 billion in China's favor, and he says that's a drag on U.S. GDP growth. He said the U.S. has lost millions of jobs to China. He said China engages in unfair trade practices and currency manipulation and has threatened new tariffs on Chinese products. I'm sure we've all seen all of that stuff. 45% is one of the figures that was mentioned. In other words, he is calling for a rebalance in the U.S.-China trade relationship. Now, concurrently, I am fascinated and encouraged by President Xi Jinping's recent speech, particularly the one at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he lauded, quote, economic globalization and free trade and investment. He had some wonderfully poetic language in that speech. It's an absolute masterpiece. And the quote I particularly liked is this one. Pursuing protectionism is just like locking oneself in a dark room. While wind and rain may be kept outside, so are light and air. Wonderful quote. Now, the U.S. business community has also applauded President Xi's comprehensive agenda for economic reform that was put forth at the 18th Communist Party Congress in 2013. Yet so far, we don't see too much specific progress. A key question here, do both leaders mean what they say? Now, I'm not going to pretend to read the mind of either one. I'm going to leave the Chinese side to Jen Li, but I am going to comment about President Trump, based not on reading his mind, but based on what I'm seeing, hearing, and watching him do so far. And what I also know from decades of participation in the political process here is that campaign rhetoric often dies down and disappears once the reality of actually having to govern sets in for a new president. This time, however, I think something is different. When he was running for president, President Trump gave voice to the frustration and anger felt by millions of Americans who felt let down by the ruling establishments of both political parties. And they elected him because I think they thought he was serious about making the changes he advocated. And his inaugural address last week underscored what he had been saying in the campaign. And I would note that at one point in that address, he said forcefully, "I will not let you down." So what I think is different this time is the sheer determination with which President Trump, his cabinet, and advisors will pursue the changes he campaigned about. And change in trade relationships was one big issue, and of course that includes the rebalance with China. And we can see already what he's been doing, talking about renegotiating NAFTA and then pulling us out of the TPP just yesterday by executive order. So further evidence to support the determination I believe I see is the appointments he has made and the views that those people have expressed. Now, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, for one, and I know you here at Brookings know him since he has been a trustee for some time. He is to have a big role in trade policy, and he's been quite outspoken about the things he believes China isn't doing properly. And if anyone has read the transcript or watched his confirmation hearing, you will have seen and heard a lot of those comments. There's Bob Lighthizer, who will be the trade representative. He also has an outspoken point of view on some of these trade activities, particularly enforcement. And then there is Peter Navarro, who heads this National Trade Council in the White House. Now, that is a new animal, and we'll have to see just how that works. But he, too, has spoken and written very candidly about China and is very hawkish. And this is going back some years. And if we look at the white paper that Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro authored during the campaign, their concerns about China and where this relationship should move in the forward, I think is really quite clear. Now, in addition, President Trump, in his own words, and by all accounts, is a master negotiator. So it may be possible that what he has said during the campaign and what he might do subsequently is the opening round of a negotiation with President Xi about the changes the U.S. would like to see in this relationship. In any case, however we look at what is going on now and what we are seeing so far, I believe everyone ought to take seriously the determination for change that I see coming out of the president and, so far, this administration. Now, turning to the Chinese side, there are some things that China could do that we'd like to see to start the rebalancing. First, market access. The U.S. market is wide open to Chinese imports. The U.S. has been very welcoming to investment from China, which has skyrocketed in the past few years. And yet, the Chinese market still has some 100 sectors which are closed or restricted to foreign investment. Now, opening these sectors could make a good start at the rebalance. So could finishing the negotiation for the bilateral investment treaty, the BIT. I know the State Council has made some moves in the opening up direction, but we haven't seen yet the results. Second, China has a variety of tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade. I won't try to enumerate those, but a lot of us know what they are, and I think China could work at lowering those. Thirdly, China has an overcapacity problem in some industries, notably steel and aluminum. And that has caused the dumping of those products at below market prices in various countries, including the U.S. Now, the U.S. has been working for years on the steel issue. And just a few days, 10 days ago actually, Mike Froman, the outgoing trade rep, filed a complaint with the WTO alleging that China is illegally subsidizing aluminum and saying that this overcapacity problem really should be corrected. And we hope that China will work harder on correcting the overcapacity issues. The final thing I will mention here is the state-owned enterprises. Chinese companies, particularly those SOEs, often receive benefits that give them a competitive advantage over foreign companies. And the U.S. side very much supports the kind of reforms that have been put forth for the SOEs. Well, given this situation and all of the different kinds of issues that are moving around there on the economic front, there is a lot to talk about. and it's important that the two sides continue to regularly engage with each other, just as they have been doing for the past few years. There are a multitude right now, 50 or more, of governmental bilateral summits and dialogues, such as the Strategic and Economic Dialogue, the U.S. China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, JCCT, and many others. These, or something similar, should be continued even if the new administration wants to restructure them. And I would say, parenthetically, I think the S&ED does need to be rethought. It's gotten too big and too cumbersome, and quite frankly, I'd like to see the economic side of it just stand by itself, the way this all began a few years back. Anyway, stay tuned, we'll see what happens here. But the point is that these dialogues provide a serious and a regular way for those who lead the two largest economies in the world to talk together, identify problems, and work to find common ground to overcome them. But, there's a big but here. But there must be leadership from the top. The tone and priorities for these dialogues must come from the two leaders. Therefore, a great deal is riding on the relationship that will develop between President Trump and President Xi. I'm hopeful that the two of them will meet and talk regularly and will establish a personal relationship. They have had an introductory phone call, which from all reports was cordial, with both expressing a desire to work together. And I'm hopeful that they will look for ways and issues on which they can work together for the good of both countries as well as the global economy. And where there are disagreements, and we know already that we have some disagreements, I'm hoping that they will look for common ground to begin to find solutions. A trade war, as some are predicting, harms both countries, creates uncertainty for many other countries, and is an activity that has no place anywhere in the interconnected global world of the 21st century. So I think that this is not going to happen. I think it will be averted. Instead, I must believe that these two leaders are pragmatic, that they understand the stakes and the need to continue a stable relationship. So they should, and I hope, will start the kind of communication and negotiation process that will be a win for both countries and the global economy. Just one final observation here, and it's this. It's true that when there's so much change possible and so many moving parts, there's always opportunity in it. There's opportunity for new understanding, innovation in ways of doing things, new processes, just new thinking. If we have the will, the leaders now have the will to seize that kind of opportunity. It's a big if, but I really am hopeful that they will do that. Stay tuned for this too. And there's one more thing. All of us in this room, I believe, are here because we care about the stability of this relationship between the two countries going forward. And it has great import, not only for our countries, but for the global economy. Now, we all have friends and colleagues and networks on both sides, on the U.S. side, on the Chinese side, or both. Now is the time to motivate ourselves and our friends, colleagues, and networks so that we can all do everything we can do from where we sit to help this relationship go forward in a stable and productive manner. Thank you. Uh-oh.
First, thanks, Bruce, for that overly generous introduction, and really thank you for the strong support for the China work in general, and also my work on the Chinese leadership, especially this book. It is a really incredible honor to share the stage with Secretary Franklin and to have her keynote today's event. Barbara is a personal friend for many years, but more importantly, he is a great pioneer and a strategic thinker, and really in every sense of those words. From her early work in the Nixon White House to recruit women for high-level government jobs, is demonstrated in your book, and also to her efforts to normalize trade relations with PRC, and as President George H.W. Bush's Secretary of Commerce, and to her service on almost 20 international business or American business corporation, and to promote trade and international economy. So it's really, really wonderful to have you at this critical moment. I think your remark is both realistic but also optimistic. It's, yes. It's really fascinating to. Now, in a little while, I will present as about the Chinese leadership. But I think that we want to have that opportunity to spend 10 to 15 minutes to the audience to ask you some questions, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. But let me ask the first question. President Trump certainly has a very ambitious plan for infrastructure development. Based on your experience, could he do that without China's capital, maybe even China's import? Is that realistic in today's world? Maybe change a little bit. Can China benefit from this gigantic infrastructure project from your expertise? So this is my question for you.
I've been told that China would like to engage in this infrastructure project. I would think that there will be many players in this infrastructure project. And where that goes, given everything else that President Trump has said about America first, I'm not entirely sure right now. Not entirely sure. I think this is one of the things we need to continue to watch. Mm-hmm. But I do think America is still open for investment. Mm-hmm. I don't think America first is going to change that.
So especially by the state government actually playing important role.
And we know that our state governments are often more welcoming than some others. Right. So I don't know. I think this is a very good question. And it will be something to follow as we get a little more clarity about just where this infrastructure project is going, mm-hmm. and where the funds are coming from for the governmental part of our funds.
Okay, great. So please raise your hand and also state your name and your affiliation, and also limit your question for one. Okay, John.
Thank you, Shirley. Madam Secretary, you have...
Identify yourself.
Oh, John Zhang with CTI TV of Taiwan. You have been realistic and optimistic. But if I ask you to give us a worst-case scenario, what can a trade war between the United States and China take us? Where can that take us? What is the worst-case scenario? Thank you.
I don't even want to go there. Because I really don't think, this is the optimistic, I don't mean to be Pollyanna, but there is reality does set in when people have to govern. It really does. And other influences come to bear and consequences become more apparent. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think we've got two pragmatic leaders here. Hope I'm not wrong, but I think we do. And so somehow, some way, they will find a way out of the clashing of points of view right now. But that's what negotiation is all about. is to find some common ground. So I don't want to go there and even paint a picture of a worst case. So call me optimistic, but I am.
You're also very diplomatic as well. And gentlemen.
My name is Alex. I'm from Russia, Fulbright student at George Washington University, a representative of probably the only country that's really excited about this new page in history. Myself very excited as well. I'm very sorry for that, but I'm being very happy about what's going on. But anyway, my question is about the Chinese barriers, the Chinese protectionism, the Chinese favoring of local producers, local protectionism, and other barriers that China did not pull down, which it, I guess, has made commitments to do. And at Davos, I guess, as the newly pronounced leader of the globalized world, it will probably have to set a standard in liberalization of international trade. I see a lot of people in Trump administration are sort of like ratcheting the bargaining position, almost, and even thinking about weaponizing Taiwan and many other issues. And it sounds like they want to open China. It's like a wrecking ball for genuinely opening China, just like maybe Reagan's threats against Japan were to open China. The question, I'm sorry for that. The question is, do you see that this could be as successful as Reagan's opening Japan was? Thank you.
I think I don't accept that that's what they're doing. They're openers. So I don't know how to answer that, I guess. But I don't see a wrecking ball here, at least not yet.
Well, I just follow up, and President Trump constantly or frequently during campaign compare himself with Reagan.
Well, yeah.
And as the person you worked for the administration, President Reagan before, right? Did you work also with his administration?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Is there any similarity from your perspective?
I think it's too soon to tell.
Okay.
So far, not
Okay.
too much, but it's too soon. I do think it's been amazing in a way, the alacrity with which this president has started to do things that he said he was going to do. And I think that has got to play well, certainly, to the people who voted for him. Now, where this goes, and will it be a sustained level of activity? Because things get tougher after a while. You can do a few things, but then he needs the Congress to do some things. Excuse me, some things, or to at least help to implement his ideas. And there are other forces that come to bear. I think it's a little too soon to make any big pronouncements. But I would leave it at that. I've been, I guess, both impressed and amazed so far at the force and the determination and the alacrity with which he has gone after some of this stuff, like TPP,
Sure.
like anything. One other thing, you were getting at a little bit of something that I didn't say, that I think concerns U.S. business people, and that is this. If there is tension in the relationship, I'm now moving over to the other side of it, to the strategic or whatever, the South China Sea or whatever kinds of things might happen. When there's tension, it causes, I think, business people to get nervous, and it causes uncertainty. And that kind of thing could impact the economic relationship.
Okay,
That
great.
was the point I just wanted to make.
I probably will take a few, then probably will close very soon. Yes, the young lady first. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Dr. Lee and Secretary Franklin. I'm Jiangning Li with Shenzhen Media Group. So the U.S. has just pulled out of TPP, and Chinese Foreign Minister also said immediately afterwards that China has made good progress on RCEP negotiations. So in your opinion, is it likely that China will complete the negotiations in the near future? And what does it mean for the economy in China and in the Asia Pacific? Thank
Yeah,
you.
we will take a few questions together. Yeah, the gentleman next.
Okay,
Yes. Hold on. Maybe probably together.
Oh,
After these three
okay.
questions. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Evil Board. I'm a portfolio manager for Raymond James. So, but my question is kind of driven by your comment, which I find interesting, that you believe Donald Trump is pragmatic. Now, what do you feel from your either personal experience with the team that is engaged with him, or maybe overtly that drives you to think that he's going to approach things in a pragmatic way?
Okay. Last question, Mr. Chen.
Hi, I'm Chen Weihua, China Daily. You just quoted President Xi's poetic, remarks in Davos. So, the impression about Donald Trump is going to retreat from globalization and free trade. So, what do you think, the leadership in global trade, free trade, globalization is going to look like in the Trump era? What role China could play and what it takes for China to play that role? Thank you.
Yeah, three questions. TPP and pragmatist as president, and president as pragmatist. And last one is China's leadership, or any leadership, in the global integration.
Let me start with pragmatic. And the reason that I think that is because of the business empire that he has built. Got to be pragmatic to have done that. So, and I don't see him as an ideological person, the way some Republicans are ideological. I do not see that. I see him as someone who wants to get results. And if you want to get results, I think you have to be pragmatic and you have to negotiate and you have to do what he's done. So that's where my comment about that comes from. TPP, let's see. Yeah, I have to say I've been a supporter of TPP, but it seems as though that support on both sides of the aisle seems to have evaporated or lessened. I do, and I don't know what you were asking about RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic. I don't know where China is in the process, or those countries. That's an agreement that's not as high a level agreement as TPP would have been. If the U.S. is not going to be engaged in TPP, I do not believe we can just walk away from our other trading partners in Asia. There's some big countries there, Japan being one. So I think that the U.S. will have to, whether it's bilateral or something else, have some kinds of relationships with some of those other countries, if absent the TPP situation. What was the
last one about international
leadership. Well, I think this remains to be seen. I do believe that the two biggest economies in the world are both going to have to shoulder some leadership here. But the U.S. still is the largest economy in the world. And it underscores the reason why these two largest economies must come to some common ground on some of these issues that are dividing them. I mean, it's to me, there is no other choice. There is no other choice.
Is it okay to take one more question? Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, the young lady.
So, thank you, Dr. Chen Li. This is Leah from VOA. You did mention, Madam Franklin, you did mention the newly established the White House National Trade Council. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about this new organization. What kind of a role it's going to play in, in the U.S. trade policy towards China? How it's going to work with the other government agencies that deals with trade relationship with China? Thank you.
Well, if I knew that, I would be a mind reader. I think it remains to be seen, and this is something to watch. This is new. And another element here, as we have to watch going forward, besides the two leaders and their relationships, are the relationships among these other players who are also new to this ship, which be the Commerce Secretary, the Trade Rep, and Peter Navarro. Now, those people haven't all worked together before, and we've got to see how all of that's going to work and whether how they work with each other and how they do what the president wants them to do. And I have no answer about how all that's going to work. But this is one of the kinds of things that I think we all have to be watching as this administration goes forward and as these people actually get into their jobs. They're not all in their jobs yet either. Yeah. So I think we have to see. Lighthizer still has I don't know if that hearing's even been set, has it? Does anybody know? He has not had a confirmation hearing yet. Wilbur Ross is not yet confirmed. I expect he will be soon. But so we've got to watch all of these relationships and how everybody works together. I'm one of these people who believes that relationships count. Relationships count. Leadership counts. There's just some really basic stuff. Tone at the top counts from my corporate world, getting back to leadership count.
Well, you said so well. Leadership count, public discourse count, public policy count. I mean, you're absolutely right that it's still so early and too early that he has been White House for a few days.
Yeah, well,
and of course, there's a lot of adjustment, there's a lot of learning curve, and also, along the way, as you see, in almost every administration, there will be a learning curve. But for him, of course, we should give him some time and etc. But what you said is very, very important. You lay out the ground, lay out the issues, and also express the importance and also at the 21st century, the global economy should look like. And also you constantly emphasize the win-win. Now, I'm sure that our panel list also have some experts on economic affairs. They will continue to address issue. I apologize for some of the audience that I cannot, because of time concern. And also Secretary also has some other engagement. You also have a very busy week. And hope that
staying to listen to you.
Besides, you probably also will look at the Twitters from the president in some music.
We need to see what's happened since we left.
Okay, but again, thank you for joining us today, and also for sharing your really incredible wisdom at this critical moment in world history, especially on world trade. I mean, this kind of a regime that is still unfolding. And I want the audience to join me. Thank you again for sharing with us.
Thank you. Okay.
It's very difficult to follow the step. But anyway, that I will now move from mainly United States to China, talk about Chinese leadership. Of course, this year there will be some other elections in Europe, other leadership changes around the world. But probably it's fair to say that Chinese leadership change in the fall this year will be very, very important. It's clearer today than any time before that China now expresses its aspiration to play a leadership role on global stage, whether economy, maybe climate change, or maybe even in the security domain. But of course, that compared with the United States, that when we have the election, everything, so much things raised, and a lot of details. Probably what we experienced in the past few months was probably the least civilized, presidential election. So a lot of noises, a lot of dirty politics. But in China, it's quite mysterious, and sounds like people said that the black box manipulation going on. So my book, which was published just 2 months ago, tried to demystify a lot of things going in China, in Zhongnanhai. And the book is quite long. It's 500 pages. Originally, it's 600 pages. And in the first proof, but the editor said, no, this is too bad. This was supposed to be used in the textbook for graduate school or high-level undergraduate. He said, this will be so intimidating. They want me to cut. But I said, no, I don't want to cut. I spent 3 years on that one. So as a compromise, they changed the size, the font. of the size. So everything, no paragraph is cut, still 500. It has 84 charts and tables. I will share some of them. 800 footnotes. It's quite long. 200 Chinese terms, most of them are new terminologies. And finally, 600 Chinese leaders. Among them, 500 are current leaders. This is based on the database I began to establish 30 years ago in 1987 as a graduate student at the UC Berkeley. Over 30 years, I built up a database about this is so-called 组织部, the organization department designated appointees, about 4,000 at a certain time. Altogether, it's about 30,000, almost 30,000 people in the database. But of course, I focus on, just I will mention in a minute, about the Central Committee members. Now, in the next maybe 30 minutes or so, I will cover 3 topics. One is share with you the objectives of the book or the issues raised in that book. And why, or basically, why did I write this book? There's so many books about Chinese politics or Chinese elite politics. How this book differs from others. Secondly, talk about the methodology and or findings in terms of how does this book approach the issues raised. And finally, it's the argument, what I try to argue, and also the outlook about the upcoming leadership change at the 19th Party Congress. Now, talk about objective. Certainly, there are a few things in my mind. One is try to explain the background and the reasons for the drastic change under Xi Jinping. There were actually a lot of changes over the past 4 years since he became top leader. And also, I want to challenge what I call the 2 extreme views about Xi Jinping's leadership, about Chinese political trajectory. One extreme is the argument that Xi Jinping is very, very powerful. It's already become like an emperor-like figure or strongman like Mao or Deng. You see the cover of the Time magazine, Newsweek, Economist, all look like emperor. And that powerful leader, and along with his military reform and many other things, will make China very, very strong, ultimately will challenge U.S. presence in South China Sea, East China Sea, and even challenge the status of the U.S. leadership in the world. So the policy recommendation is to contain China before too late. The other extreme is just the opposite, arguing that Xi Jinping actually is quite weak. His anti-corruption campaign made so many enemies, and he really could not get things done. Look at the economic reform plan outlined in the third platinum 1 year after he became top leader. Most of these policies, according to some critics, not implemented. And the forces, and especially officials or liberal intellectuals and other forces, especially when economy could not deliver, and all these forces will assemble, will undermine Xi Jinping, and not only Xi Jinping is weak, but also the Chinese Communist Party is in big trouble. But ironically, that extreme views also came to the same conclusion, to contain China, because there's no cost in doing so. Now, I believe these 2 extreme views really undermine American interests. The truth, as you probably will agree, is somewhere in between. He's neither that strong nor that weak. Otherwise, you cannot explain, some of the things that I'm going to discuss. So this book certainly tries to challenge these 2 extreme views, and also argue U.S. should not lose this great opportunity, and we should engage with Xi Jinping, with his leadership. Otherwise, we'll really undermine American interests. And certainly that I want to access the so-called collective leadership framework. More importantly, try to find whether there's an institutional mechanism, and certainly I believe there's an institutional mechanism which really we basically fail to understand how endurable and how dynamic that mechanism
and finally forecast the upcoming 19th Party Congress. Now, talking about leadership change, I use that picture. Previously, 7 members of the Power Bureau Standing Committee, Xi Jinping is the first among equal. But now he's far more powerful than the other 6 in that leadership body. And he holds 13 top leadership positions, including many leading groups. And just a few days ago, he got another one. And it's called the Central Military and the Civilian Integration Development Committee, just only three or 4 days ago. So altogether, he has basically 13 or 14 leadership positions. So this is called the concentration of power in contrast to Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao era. And also that usually Mao, towards the later period of his life, they started this kind of work published. But Xi Jinping, in the first couple of years, already published his work. This is actually 8 foreign languages. There's pictures, there's cartoons, all seem to echo what some liberal intellectuals criticize, the personality cut or Cultural Revolution style, with or without justification. But that's the things change over the past 4 years in contrast to Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao era. But some questions hardly addressed or inadequately addressed among the China study community in China and outside China. Here are the 3 questions I think we should pay attention. First, what caused this change? Secondly, how could this have happened? And finally, are these changes temporary or long-term? Of course, that my analysis will tell us that it's a short-term, it's temporary, cannot be sustainable. This is certainly my argument. But let's look at the first 2 questions. What problem does this change, and how could this have occurred? Now, people tend to have short memory, including myself. Sometimes I just think what happened, like Bo Xilai, many other things like the long history. But actually, just only 5 years ago. And before Xi Jinping came to power, let's look at what China looked like. There was a rampant corruption. There's a serious legitimacy crisis. And there's a fragmentation of the leadership. That each Power Bureau Standing Committee in control one department, one bureaucracy. It sounds like there's no communication, no coordination. And this is particularly in the case of uncontrolled power of Bo Xilai and especially Zhou Yongtang. And this is called, again, fragmentation. It's reached a very high degree. The Communist Party leadership almost become malfunctioning. And also PLA start to resist the civilian leadership. During the Wenchuan earthquake, Wen Jiabao stood in front of the TV crying, begging military send the troops to the poverty relief, to the disaster relief area. But still, Guo Boxiong and the other leaders refused to take an order. And also the central government economic policy or orders were resisted by local government, local meaning provincial or municipal government. So this is the famous saying that the order cannot go beyond Zhongnanhai. And finally, foreign relations also experienced some problem, as Zhi Zongyun, a distinguished Chinese public intellectual who used to serve as a translator for Chairman Mao and Zhou Enlai, she said China, again, 4 or 5 years ago, she said China did not have friends except North Korea and Cuba. Now, that's the situation that Xi Jinping experienced. Of course, he needs to fix all these problems. Now, let's very quickly look at the corruption. This is actually, I would think, the first, the biggest scandal related with the railroad ministry by the bureau chief, Zhang Suguang, according to media in China and overseas, that that guy had $2.8 billion US in his offshore bank account. Although the final, prosecution report had a much lower price, but early on, that was the number frequently quoted. His boss, minister, we never seen how much he stolen from the state, but he has a nickname called Mr. 4%. And also that it's a common knowledge in China that the guy had 374 luxury housing units. Now, he's not a particularly attractive guy, look at the appearance, but he's extremely generous to give the woman. He had affairs, one unit after another, etc. So that's where 374 units came from. Now, the military guy, this is also the first card, Lieutenant General Gu Junshan, and he was in charge of logistics. And this is his villa built in his hometown in Henan, and they found 4 trucks of gold and the Maotai. It's expensive, and more expensive than gold, the Maotai Chinese record, but 4 trucks. These are all come to the public knowledge. Now, this is a famous crisis. I don't need to tell you about the Boxi Line. Really, it's the biggest crisis probably ever in the PRC history. And this is another one. It's by Hu Jintao, Chief of Staff, Lin Jihua, which involved his son who drove Red Florida. This is his wife, and also 2 Tibetan women. One of them was killed along with the driver, Lin Jihua's son. Now, these scandals or incidents all in the Chinese domain, in Chinese public eyes. The most important one is these 3. These are the highest ranking civilian and military leaders purged, and the Chinese call the biggest tigers. Now, this goes back to the other questions. How could this have occurred? Xi Jinping get rid of them and start to change. This is largely to do with the fact that we still do not fully understand how that occurred, that all of a sudden he and Jiang Zemin, his patron, really had a landslide victory, and after the 18th Party Congress. I'm going to explain and in detail. Then also Xi Jinping launched a very bold and big and broader anti-corruption campaign, the largest ever in the PRC history. He also started very successfully a large-scale military reform, although the military reform will take 5 years to complete. The most important part already completed within 6 months. And this is the reform that even Deng Xiaoping wanted to do but failed to do, but Xi Jinping achieved it with the support of the party. And also that in 2013, he at least outlined a very ambitious market reform plan. And finally, he adopted so-called new proactive foreign policy, included the concept, a new type of major power relations, largely referred to the United States, and also One Belt, One Road initiative, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And also, as the Secretary Franklin mentioned, that his recent appearance in Davos reflects that China's ambition in the global affairs. Now, this is the background. This is explaining why it happened, how it happened, and let's look at the second thing that I pay attention. It's the methodology. It's the book really about the individual leader versus the institutional constraints, that the dynamic. Try to find the best balance in the Chinese context. But my sources usually from almost most of them from the official bioinformation, which I collected over the 30 years. But time to time, I also use non-official sources, but always verify in the book. And I do not use too many rumors, and especially we enter the rumor season, you can see basically get any kind of rumors. I mean, very, very sexy, many of them. And also that there's a balance between quantitative and qualitative research. But the emphasis, the book, is on actually both, with a strong component of the analysis of 376 members of the 18th Central Committee, the current Central Committee. And finally, the book also used the Western series called Elite Series, but tested in the concept I tried to develop, the notion I developed about 10 years ago called one party, two coalitions, borrowing Deng Xiaoping's famous line, one country, two systems, to analyze Chinese politics. The basic argument is Chinese leadership is not, China is a one-party state, but the Chinese leadership is not a monolithic group. It consists of competing factions, and factions form coalitions or camps. And this is, in a way, to a certain extent, similar to American two-party system, Republican and Democrat. Now, This is the organization chart. On the top is General Secretary Xi Jinping. Then it's a 7-member of Power Bureau Standing Committee. Then it's a 25 people Power Bureau. Then the 376 Central Committee. They were elected by National Party Congress delegates, 2,268. They only met once every 5 years. They met once to select these 376 Central Committee members. And finally, the party has about 88 million members. Now, this part is the focus, is the Central Committee. It's the one I focus about the 376. This is actually, if you want to have a political future, you should belong to that group. These people, this Central Committee, the Central Committee includes, provincial party secretaries, governors, vice governors, ministers, vice ministers, senior military leaders, and the organization department, propaganda, and etc. Altogether, 376. Now, this is what happened 4 years ago in the 18th Party Congress. The yellow color are the new members, the blue are remaining members. In these 6 most important leadership bodies, Central Committee, Anti-Corruption Commission, Secretariat, this is in charge of daily flow of information or papers, and the Power Bureau, very powerful, 25 people, Power Bureau Standing Committee, and the Central Military Commission. In these 6 leadership bodies, you can see majority of them are new. That tells us that the very strong, very dynamic flow of the Chinese leadership. Now, this has not only happened 4 years ago. This is a look at the Central Committee since 1982. On average, is 62% change. Now, I'm always trying to find the percentage of our Congress, senators or congressmen. What I heard from staff, they said that it's probably less than 20% every 4 to 6 years. So China is 3 times. China is no democracy, but the kind of circulation of the Chinese elites much faster. That explains how Communist Party survived over the years, how the party tried to remain, to be relevant, to represent certain interest groups, etc. Now, the upcoming 19th Party Congress, the red color, I estimate, will be 70%. This is based on each individual's calculation. Some of them, 25 of them are already purged, and some of them are already retired, and some of them that do not look good. And so you end up with 70% change. Now, this will be the largest change since 1969 during the Cultural Revolution. So it's already happened in the local level. Hunan province, for example, there are 13 standing committee of Hunan Provincial Party Committee. 12 of them are new. This is certainly indicate what kind of scale change we can expect. Now, this is also the average tenure in terms of years of the provincial party secretaries and governors. These are very, very important positions. Later, I will continue to emphasize. The average tenure is very, very brief, very, very short. Provincial party secretaries usually serve only 2 years in their spot on average. The governors, it's even less. It's 1.5 years. This is, again, very fast turnover. Extremely fast turnover. You probably cannot find this kind of turnover rate in any country, but China become almost regularized this kind of change. Some retire, some promoted, and some transfer to another positions. Now, this is all related with the institutional norm and the rules apply. And for example, age limit. Anyone who were born in or before 1944 will automatically disqualify for membership in the 18th Party Congress. 5 years before is 1939. You can expect that upcoming year is 1949. Anyone who was born 1949 or earlier will retire. Now, it's yet to see whether this norm will be changed or not. My sense is very, very difficult to change that norm. The term limits is not just norm, but the rules. So every leader could serve 2 5-year terms in the same position, and 3 5-year terms at the same leadership of same level of leadership. For example, that if you are standing committee members, you can only stay there for 3 terms, even you change position, premier or general secretary. So that's the rule will restrain some leaders to go beyond, 3 terms or 2 terms, depending on the definition of the position. And also there's a regional representation. That's very, very important development. That's really contribute to Chinese internal check and balance. During the Party Congress, each province will have 2 full seats, 2 membership seats for the 4 members of Central Committee. Now, of course, after the Party Congress, they can rotate, they can change. But during the time, these 31 provincial level entities, each has 2. And also there's elections going on in China, almost for 30 years. It's a limited election. It's called more candidates than seats. For example, if they want to elect 376 Central Committee members, they will put 10% more, 7 to 12% more candidates, and the lowest will be eliminated. So that's the limited things. And sometimes people are considered for Politburo. For example, the former Minister of Commerce, you probably met, and Chen Deming, he was considered as Politburo member, but he was eliminated in that election. So you must be Central Committee, then we're considered as Politburo. So it's immediately disqualified. So that's the election could be quite effective in a way. Now, despite China's a lot of deficiencies in Chinese political system, we should not forget a couple of things. One is China already experienced not only once, but twice, largely orderly generational transfer of power. Orderly and peaceful generation transfer of power. First from Jiang Zemin to Hu Jintao in 2002, then from Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping in 2012. And also not only generational change, but also occupational transformation of Chinese leaders. Twice. First from old-fashioned communists to technocrats, meaning engineer turned politicians. And then from technocrats to a more diverse group of economic managers, SOE entrepreneurs, and legally trained political leaders. This is some of the pictures of a transition. This is the study of the rise and the fall of technocrats. Again, in 1982, there was only one minister who meets the definition of technocrat. That was Li Peng, who later became premier. And there's no technocrats as provincial chief or governor. But then increased, then in later 1990s, reached a peak, then start to decline. This is a typical case of the rise and fall of technocrats in China over the past 3 decades. This is in the Central Committee. It's the same pattern. And look at the high-level leadership. Even more so, this is the red color is the Politburo Standing Committee, and the blue color is the Politburo. Now it's only 16% to 14%. About 10 years ago, or also in the so-called 14th and 16th Party Congress, all Politburo Standing Committee members are engineers by training. But now it's come to end. They're currently, in terms of highest degree, only one person, Yu Zhengsheng, has an engineering degree, and in terms of highest degree. So that's the pattern change. Meanwhile, there's a rise of those trained in social sciences and, believe it or not, in law. And blue color is the social sciences, red color is law in terms of the Central Committee members, 4 members. Of course, those in terms of law, there's some subgroup. I divided them. One is the only law degree in name. Actually, they study politics or study Marxism. According to Chinese definition, Marxism is a law, so therefore they have law degree. Now, but this is only the first category. The second is really legally trained, and really very much like a Western training, because the Chinese discipline of law is largely adopted by Western, by German, American, and Japanese models. China did not have the legal tradition. So these people received this kind of training, but they never practiced. The most obvious example is Premier Li Keqiang. He got a solid law degree at Beida, Peking University, but they never practiced as a lawyer. The third group is not only got a law degree, some of them actually overseas, and some of them not only undergraduate, but also advanced studies, but also practice and spend the entire career in the legal profession and in the court and and the prosecution and etc. So this is the last group. It's about 25%. So this is the division. Now, let me also very quickly move to the provincial leaders as a stepping stone for top leadership. As we know, China's top leadership usually selected by provincial leaders. You look at the 76%, about 2/3 of the Politburo members in the past two-party Congress are advanced from the provincial chief, governors, or provincial party secretaries. Now, it is interesting to see, this is, I just completed just yesterday, because 3 days ago, some local government changed the leadership, like Beijing, Tianjin, and Shanghai. We're going to talk about this provincial leadership. But this is the leader served in the business firms and the major companies, not private firms. Private firms still yet probably wait one generation for people like Jack Ma and to emerge as political leaders. But not now. He still needs to wait. Even he met with Donald Trump before Chinese leaders. But these are in the CEOs, major companies in space industry, in many other in banks, and the agriculture bank, and the construction bank, and etc. And these are the people really running in firms, much like in the global competition. They are CEOs for many years, but now they are located as governors and even provincial party secretary. Many of them are still young. They can have 2 terms. So I will not be surprised in 10 years, a CEO, today's CEO, will become probably candidate for premier. And this will happen in about 10 years, probably. Now, let me very quickly mention that my basic series is what I call one party, two coalitions. This could be controversial. I got a lot of criticism, but I still stay with my argument. Now, I'm going to go back to that. The one party, two coalition refer to 2 camps, represent 2 different social, political, and geographical regions, not purely for the power, but also have local or institutional representation. These 2 coalitions are usually, though not always, equally powerful and tend to rotate terms in the driver's seat. And thirdly, they have different policy initiatives and priorities. They complement each other in terms of leadership skills and expertise. And finally, they compete with each other on certain issues, but are willing to cooperate on others. The bottom line is they're in the same boat, and it's the same inspiration for China's rise and for survival of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this is divided into the formation of the 2 coalitions. I call them Jiang and Xi coalition. Now, that's the controversial part. Many people think that Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping are engaged in vicious power struggle. Our journalists report that. I think this is terribly wrong. Now, Falun Gong, I saw some of friends here, Falun Gong friends here, represent newspaper, also had the advertisement when Xi Jinping visited the United States about 4 years ago or so, that the New York Times advertisement saying wonderful things about Xi Jinping because they thought Xi Jinping will arrest Jiang Zemin. But that certainly it's not going to happen because, of course, they have there's some differences, but they are very much on the same coalition. And sometimes there's some different views, but by and large, they come together. But the things is certainly not Falun Gong. And China study scholars, many people in China, outside China, believe these are infightings, but I do not see that. Yes, some of the people purge Jiang Zemin's proteges, but that's related to several things. One is bad luck. You really cannot protect something in bad luck. Sometimes outrageous nature. Sometimes for the common survival, you need to sacrifice for various reasons. This should go back case by case. So previously, it's the Shanghai gang, the core group, now become princelings, the Taizidang, the core group, but it included SOE entrepreneurs, urban leaders, coastal region leaders. But the Hu Jintao Li Keqiang coalition has the same core as the Chinese Communist Youth League. This is by strict definition. Those leaders in the provincial and the central level of the Youth League who work under Hu Jintao when Hu Jintao was in charge of the Youth League, or under Li Keqiang in the 1990s when Li Keqiang was in charge of Youth League. You also actually eliminated some people actually closer to the other faction, but also advance their career from Youth League. So when that kind of definition, you can distinguish the two groups. Now, interesting to see that 10 years ago, the number 1 and number 2 leaders in these 6 organizations, most important, powerful organizations, one of each. And 10 years later, now, also look at these 7 most powerful leadership bodies, including standing committee, number 1, number 2 leader, presidency, president and the only vice president, state council is the premier or executive vice premier, central military commission, chairman, executive vice chairman. Again, all number 1, number 2 come from 2 different coalitions. Now, this is the one I used 6 years ago before Bo Xilai's fall. You look at these important bodies. In the Politburo Standing Committee, only 2 members are 5th generation, Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang, 1 of each. Only 6 of them considered as the 5th generation, 3 of each. Secretary, and 2 of each. Vice Premier, altogether 4, 2 of each. State Councilor, there are altogether 5. 1 is the military. I deleted military, 2 of each. Now, you can see this is coincident, but I think there's a structured tendency to divide this leadership into 2 coalitions to check, balance each other. But what surprised people is 4 years ago, it's become imbalanced, largely because of some of the scandals that Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping got landslide victory. This is 6 versus 1 ratio. And this is Tuanpai leaders largely marginalized. But the next level, Politburo, is more evenly divided. But then you look at Central Committee. Among these 376 people, it's just opposite. This the Tuanpai Youth League. Yellow is the alternate members. Light blue is the 4 members. They had altogether, the current party Central Committee, 96 members. Although probably like 12, 13 of them are recently purged. But when it's established, this is the largest faction. It's almost a quarter of the Central Committee. But principally, it's small numbers. Now, very quickly, go with the Youth League representation in top leadership bodies. You look at the Politburo, 24% of Youth League. Secretary, 42%. I mean, it's really quite well represented. Central Committee, a quarter, as I mentioned, the 96 people. State Council, 10 executive members, premier, vice premier, and state councilor, 40%. And the Minister of State Council, 30%. Most well represented in provincial party secretary and provincial governors. But the last 2 things start to change over the past 3 years. This is, again, provincial chiefs. You can see that the party secretary who are Youth League members declined from 45% to 16%. This reflects Xi Jinping's consolidation of power, very remarkable change over the past 3 years. Again, provincial chief is the most important stepping stone. You already see that Xi Jinping consolidated his power, and also in the governance, this change. Now, this is it's the newly appointed provincial chief, like a Beijing mayor, Shanghai mayor, Tianjin mayor. They are all Xi Jinping's confidant. These 10 people are relatively new. Many of them, particularly first line, they are all leading candidates for Politburo later this year. They are all work under Xi Jinping for many, many years, and in some cases, 30 years ago. Now they are well positioned to take over. Now let's look at my argument. Time limits, I understand. Despite the continuing of the one-party state over the past 3 decades, the CCP has continually sought new mechanisms, institutional regulations, political norms, and policy measures to resolve the inherent deficiencies for the sake of survival. And secondly, China's collective leadership model, with its internal checks and balances, is more dynamic and enduring than many overseas analysts believe, probably also more than the Chinese intellectuals believe. Finally, Xi Jinping's power and the legacy, which may better be assessed following the 19th Party Congress, will largely depend on whether he embraces the institutional, political institutionalization in the governance of this increasingly pluralistic society. Because if he go against that trend, I think that he will experience some very, very difficult challenges, and because the institutional norm and regulations is far enduring than we thought. Now, the focus in the 19th Party Congress still will be on the Power Bureau Standing Committee, not on the leading group. And this is 10 years ago, the change. This is the 5 years ago, the change, the Power Bureau Standing Committee. Now, just in several months, later this fall, 5 of them will retire. So who will be the replacement? There's a lot of big question mark. These are the leading candidates. And they are qualified in terms of age and based on their recent position and their activities. And it sounds like most of them will survive, will be strong candidates. But the tricky part is whether you will identify a successor or not. Previously, after 5 years, you should identify a successor. But this is very unclear whether Xi Jinping will identify a successor, which means the so-called sixth-generation leaders. There are 4 people in contentious position, probably more, but at the moment, these 4 are identified, including 2 Power Bureau members, current Guangdong Party Secretary and Chongqing Party Secretary, but also 2 rising stars who very closely work with Xi Jinping, and the Guizhou Party Secretary and Jiangsu Party Secretary. The first 2 are not Xi Jinping's proteges. The other 2 are Xi Jinping's protege. Now, military also will experience major change. And among the 11 members, only 2 or 3 will stay on. So that will be the largest military turnover we can expect. Now, let's very quickly look at Xi Jinping's power base. He actually is uniquely positioned. Most of the other leaders just positioned in the either coastal region or inland region, but Xi Jinping reached out both. And he is a princeling, represents the so-called second generation of communist red nobility, Hong Er Dai. But also he has strong ties with the so-called Shanxi gang. And Shanxi is not only his father's, has strong family ties. His father pursued the revolutionary experience in that region and was born there. And Xi Jinping himself was a so-called settled youth during the Cultural Revolution for 7 years, lived in Shanxi. So a lot of his people promoted actually come from that period. But also he advanced his leadership in the provincial leadership, especially Fujian, Zhejiang, and Shanghai. And many of the proteges now in the fast move for promotion. Xi Jinping, as we know, also served as 2 or 3 years as the Misu, personal assistant to DOD secretary. That had made him have some connections with the military. And also many of his Tsinghua classmates also on the fast move. And finally, he has a lot of Misu, personal assistants. Now, I summarize, these are the rising stars. And start with Shanxi, Li Zhanshu, Zhao Leji, and Li Xi. Then in Beijing, his childhood friend Liu He will play a very, very important role on economic affairs. Chen Xi, his classmate, roommate at Tsinghua, will be promoted. Cai Qi is already promoted as Beijing mayor. Highly likely he will become Beijing party secretary. And He Lifeng, Wang Kunming, and Song Tao is currently ranked number 2 person in the foreign ministry, foreign policy establishment, only next to Yang Jieci. And Chen Ming'er is mentioned Li Qiang, both from Zhejiang years. Now they are well positioned. And Ying Yong just recently appointed as Shanghai mayor. And in Shanghai, including Han Zheng and Ding Xuexiang and Yang Shaodu, currently just recently appointed a person in charge of supervision. These are the rising stars. But even all of them, as designated to Power Bureau Standing Committee and Power Bureau and the Secretary, they still only occupied 40 to 50% of these leadership bodies. They cannot take all these positions. So again, Xi Jinping has to share power. So let's finally look at the 4 scenarios. What we can see. There are 4 options. One is winner take all. Politburo Standing Committee become Xi Jinping's personal cabinet, upon the U and UNU, maybe even disregard age or terms. This is one option. Second option is return to the so-called team of rivals, which means you should let some Tuanpai leaders to join the Politburo Standing Committee. Thirdly, is downsizing the Politburo Standing Committee, change 7 to 5, not allow any 6th-generation leaders to enter that body, so which you delay the succession process to wait and see, but also enhance the role of secretary. And finally, previously that Xi Jinping was weak in the Central Committee, but now Central Committee become 70% new members, many of them his proteges or like-minded people. He asked them to elect Politburo. Highly likely his proteges will be elected, and then he has a legacy as the man to start the new stage of the so-called intra-party democracy. Now, I don't want to go with the list, but the thing is, each of them involves some difficulties, involves challenges, but Xi Jinping need to address them. Now, previously, we see Xi Jinping is a man of contradiction in virtually every issue areas. You cannot make a generalization without somewhere a but, as you said, a but. For example, that on economic reform, he laid out the very ambitious the market reform, but he also a champion for state-owned enterprises, talking to make them bigger and stronger. And on the role of intellectuals are very critical about the media control, about the personality cut. But at the same time, Xi Jinping is a leader to want to promote think tanks. By definition, think tank is a place for intellectuals. Right. And on religious freedom, I mean, he's not so forthcoming with Tibetan or other religious issues, but we should not be surprised if the Pope will visit China someday in near future, right? And on the color revolution, certainly that's the things he strongly resists. But Xi Jinping is also a man who met with Burmese leader Aung San Suu Kyi, not only once, but I think 2 or 3 times. And this is a very symbol of color revolution. And also Xi Jinping's wife, First Lady, heavily engaged in NGOs, foreign NGOs, like tobacco controls, AIDS prevention, and women's rights and children's rights, etc. On rule of law, as we know that human rights lawyers are arrested, and there's a lot of control. But at the same time, Xi Jinping devoted the one meeting in the state the Central Committee meeting on rule of law. He probably more than any other leaders, try to adopt more regulations and laws and etc. And according to people very close to him, that Xi Jinping really want to leave some legacy in this area. Of course, at the moment, we see a lot of criticism. And on major power relations, he certainly wanted to improve relation with Russia, play around that China-Russia relation, but ultimately, he cared more U.S. China relations than anything else. Finally, that in Asia-Pacific security, one day he said, Asia belongs to Asia. Then following week, he said, Asia-Pacific is big enough to allow the United States and China both to be there. Now, with all these contradictions, he certainly wants to position himself. But at this point, in the early stage, probably it's a smart move for him. But sooner or later, he needs to make some decision. I think next 5 years will be very, very important. To end my presentation, let me quote. This is Chinese saying, but interesting enough that Xi Jinping used it last year and when he talked about Chinese leadership. This is a quote: limited wisdom makes doers. Moderate wisdom makes managers. Superior wisdom makes law builders. Again, Xi Jinping used that term, just that quote, in 1 or 2 meetings recently. So, of course, we should test the next 5 years whether he really means that. And thank you very much. The book is available, and I will be happy to sign. Is that possible? I take some questions? Take a few questions. Yeah, please.
Chris McRae, Norman McRae Foundation. I particularly like the last chapter of your book because I read it as giving a map of the next 2 years, which are maybe very critical both in China and the US, I was wondering, could you maybe make a list of the top 5 things on the agenda for Xi Jinping over the next 2 years? Obviously, you've mentioned the 19th Party Congress, and we've had the U.S.-America relations. What might be the other 3 be?
Well, China, like the United States, sometimes is driven by event. So unexpected event will drastically change his top priority. But assume that he could relatively control, I think, 3 things he will do. Number 1, actually, is economic reform. At the moment, if you buy my argument, he is really not firmly in control, because that a lot of leaders are Tuanpai, Communist Youth League. They may resist certain policies. But after the 19th Party Congress, his people will be far more, far better position, so he can carry out the economic reform that he actually not have been doing so well in the past few years. Now, someone said that Xi Jinping did not care about the economic reform. I don't buy that. Of course, for him, the priority is consolidate his power to pursue military reform. I think there's a legitimate reason for him to do so, without which he himself will be in big trouble. But if he does not care economic affairs, he will not, control all these positions, particularly economic leadership position. And so that means that he wants to make, his legacy in this particular area. It is very, very difficult, but I think we will see that he will carry out a lot of reform programs which are delayed. This is number 1. Number 2, again, he is not known as a political reformer. But on the other hand, he understands the importance of institutional development. Ultimately, his legacy will be determined by that. So whether he will pursue some institutional reform, and of course, that in my view, he may not identify successor later this year, but it does not mean that he can resist any kind of arrangement. So how to make arrangement, I don't know. But I think that he must think hard. If you just refuse to take that, not only your critics will go after you, even your allies think that you do not do a good service. So that's the things, is a big challenge. Now, certainly he will have more control about the party, discipline them, establish more mechanism, but what kind of details yet to see. Finally, it's the international arena. You already see he's quite busy, he travels a lot, and he probably more than any other his colleagues wanted to, seize the moment to make China as a leader in certain areas. But of course, he need to be careful. He need to make sure that it's not unnecessary, prematurely pursue that position. And so these are the 3 things I think his top priority. Yes.
I'm currently affiliated with a Tibetan NGO here. My question is, there's this speculation among Tibetan scholars that once Chinese Xi Jinping consolidated his power, there's a chance that he may not engage directly with Dalai Lama, but there is a possibility that he, remove some restrictions on religious and Buddhist stuff, because he mentioned Buddhism as one of Chinese civilization in Paris 2 years ago. So what do you think of that? Thank you.
Well, in general, I think that there's a strong tolerance about Buddhist activities. But Tibetan Buddhism is probably a different issue. And we certainly expected that for a long time, partly because his father actually had personal friendship with His Holiness Dalai Lama, right? And but the Tibetan community thought that that's a great opportunity, but certainly we did not see any progress over the past 4 years. Whether he will make some move in this area, I do not see much evidence. But all depends on, and because I do believe that probably from Chinese leadership perspective, you do see a lot of pressures. I mean, from their perspective, Taiwan, Hong Kong, now, Xinjiang, Uyghur issues, and Tibetan issues. These are all very, very difficult challenges. And whether he will make some move in certain areas, whether it's because of his success or because of his difficulties and the pressure, I do not know. I try to find a pattern that probably sometimes he would take initiative rather than under pressure. And but the dialogue, negotiation with the Pope, and that has been going on. It's become open, whether he probably will go with that first, then to see the reaction. But on the other hand, that some of his people are famous for crackdown in home church, but at the same time that you do see the other trend that talk about some Buddhism should be promoted and etc. So I cannot answer your question, but I do see that the framework and what you lay out so nicely. And the next few, the woman, the young girl.
Hi, this is Yi Jiachen. I have a question regarding your argument about the one party to coalition argument posed to that there are a lot of turnover, about 70% for each 4 years.
Central Committee.
And now another argument from me would be the quick turnover also push some incentives that those governors choose more short-term policies that may induce some short-term legacies for them because they only have 2 to 5 years, which cause some other negative externality like the pollutants or other things. Would you think this is kind of incentive for them? Thank you.
Well, you're right. That's a problem. And that's why Bo Xilai wanted to plant grass rather than trees. Trees take many years, grass only 1 season. So that's tell you, why they usually have short terms. In a city, in Dalian, was a lack of water. Actually, you really need to have trees rather than grass. But he against that plan for the reason that you point out. But let's face it, in our system, the election, and President Donald Trump said it's so long. I mean, he would say it's so long, but it's long. Also, a lot of distractions. So again, these governance issues, each system has some problems. But the good thing is that they move around at the same position. They got to practice. China certainly have much longer period for training, for learning. And then all of a sudden, someone had no experience will be promoted to a very, very high level. And but at the same time, it's not transparent. It's not democratic in that way. So there's a trade-off. But your concern is legitimate concern, the short-term behaviors. Yes. Yes, you.
Thank you. This is Beichan Wu with Shanghai Media Group. I have a quick question. Given your extensive knowledge of the leadership on both sides, do you think the two sides understand each other well enough? Like, does the Chinese side know well enough about the Trump's administration, and does the Trump administration understand well enough about the Chinese leadership?
Do we know Trump administration well? Do you expect the Trump administration know China well? Well, I think there are a lot of limitations. You have good questions. I think that in a way, previously, since 1970s, especially since established normalized relations in 1979, China and the United States have a lot of things going on, not in the top level, but also basically 100, 200, including some of my colleagues here. There's a lot of communications. But when Trump, when the White House, there's really a huge gap. Chinese did not know who to call. And that could be very, very anxious and highly problematic. So at the moment, there are a lot of anxieties. And China is probably not the top priority for Donald Trump's team. But at the same time, I do believe that the administration understands the importance of China. But there are some other urgent issues, right? Both in the economic front and also security front. So I think it will take some time, and the whole team has not formed yet. And so far, as Secretary Franklin said, China's reaction has been cautious, not overreact. And that's probably smart on their part. But the question is, I mean, Chinese, just like we have media, their media become increasingly critical. And some of the bottom, red line issues like Taiwan and et cetera, if the administration, the top leader constantly push, will make Chinese more antagonistic. So that's the dimension we should look at that, right? There's a lot of, it's a new game. But ultimately, I'm optimistic. I think that the fact is we don't have too many choices. And certain issues will be lose-lose. Certain issues will be win-win. Trade should be win-win. Taiwan issue we do not handle appropriately will be lose-lose. I mean, for all parties. So again, I mean, this is not so difficult to imagine and for any leaders. We will take one more, then because we'll move to the next panel. There's so many experts. Yes, please, you haven't, waited so patiently. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Mark Dowles. I'm professor of political science, and I'm at sabbatical at GW. I wanted to ask about how you, your one party, two coalitions idea, and you mentioned the idea that they're creating constituencies. And I want you to sort of explain what you mean by the constituencies. I mean, you've got the inland and the coastal and rural and urban. Are they actually representing in some way those constituencies? And also, if there's so much circulation, unless if their turnover is every 2 years, if they're not retaining jobs with that constituency, let's say internal to the inland area or not, then how do they actually build any kind of connection with those different groups?
Excellent question. It's how they build up largely because of your career, who promote you. That's the key. And usually there's no ambiguities who promote you. And also that we talk about the two coalition, of course there's some exceptions. You look at our country, Democratic and Republican, sometimes, primary even more vicious, right? But also these factions, this coalition could change. Now, Tuan Pai is certainly in trouble, but it's not completely gone yet, right? But even if not Tuan Pai, some other forces will form coalition to try to constrain power automatically in a way, because the seats are represented by different regions. And also there's some election mechanism. There's also tendency that all the other forces come together to try to contain some of power. And all these norms and regulations, rules, actually are designed in a way to constrain power. Now, most interesting is the recent party meeting, the so-called Sixth Platinum. I thought they may not use the term collective leadership, actually use the term collective leadership. They talk about constraints of power. So, again, compromise is necessary. At the moment, the party wanted to give Xi Jinping enough power to carry out much needed reform. Could you imagine without such power he can do all these things, anti-corruption, military reform, and China's foreign policy change? No. But does that mean that he has a free, empty check, can do whatever he wants to do? No. The fact is, a lot of intellectual criticism itself is constrained, right? And you also should constantly deliver. And so it's a very dynamic situation. And so it's ever-changing. But at the same time, that kind of mechanism already has been used for the past 30 years. And China, just like us, become increasingly pluralistic. They face the same media problem, constant change. And so in that regard, I think certainly when I wrote that book, the criticism of the American system is not that well known. Even in the circle of Washington or the academia. And so certainly when I write this book, I always constantly, have a sense of humility to appreciate more about the things, the experiments China wanted to do. You cannot say these things are completely hopeless. And I think they already found some mechanism. Now, these are not legitimate, some of the factional politics. It's not completely transparent. Although you ask a taxi driver, they will tell you which leader belongs to which faction, that the new appointment is whose person. So they're not in the complete dark. So that also gave you the sense that Chinese political structure, probably based on that, will continue to unfold in a way that the institutional mechanism will and it's already effective, will continue to be challenged or tested, and I hope that they will survive. So let me finish here. We have a wonderful panel. Really cannot assemble that the better people. These are the scholars or practitioners in their own right are prominent figure, but also they are leaders in government, in journalism, in academia. So please join me to welcome the next panel, and moderated by Evan Osnar. Is he here? Okay. I hope that, yeah, so please come to the stage. And thank you so much and for your attendance. Yeah.